Okay, day two. This is the second talk that I watched of the day. It was in the morning. It was with James Taylor. It was fantastic. Actually, I have to say that I do love James, and he's got this great British humor. I just think it's so funny. He's just very quick with it. So definite appreciation for James Taylor. And I have to say that James, if you don't know and you are a Breast Teasel member, you should know that James is amazing. He is the leader of the Materials Writing SIG. And he is also currently, I think it's the communications director. Sorry if I got the title wrong. I'm not super clear on, but he does like pretty much everything that you see on the social media and stuff. That's all James, and we have to give him a big shout out because this breast teasel conference would not be possible with the ton of work. I can't unimaginable amount of work that he probably did to put it on. So thank you so much, James. And it was nice to finally actually meet you because we had exchanged WhatsApp messages. But James Taylor gave a wonderful talk. Is ELT guilty of greenwashing? So first of all, let me get my phone. I have some notes here too. So first of all, he went into, which was awesome, the most depressing opening of a talk at Breast Teasel that I've ever seen. But that was his objective, and he nailed it. He did a really good job. So pretty much what he was talking about was the current situation, the current state of the world, and how we're in this critical scenario and kind of crisis in terms of climate and the environment and things like that. I mean, we're just kind of at a tipping point with a lot of things, and his was focusing on greenwashing. Okay, and I have to get the definition of greenwashing. I have it here. Oh, well, then he gave his position on what he where he stands. So everybody knew very clearly where he stood and where he was going with this. And I think that was important because, you know, the good thing about James's talk was this is like a really difficult subject to talk about because people obviously have their own personal opinions about it. I mean, within my family, my nuclear family, there's people that have different ideas about several different things. So yeah, this is kind of, you know, this is just, it happens. But being able to talk about hard things in a very productive way, I think is important. And the first thing to do, in my opinion, to do that is to give your position. And James did a great job because he wanted to let everybody know this is how he felt about it. And I didn't feel necessarily that if you disagreed with him that there was going to be any issue, right? There, you know, everybody can have their own opinion about things that are going on in the world, and that's fine. Okay, so I'm trying to find the Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Okay, so then I'll try and find it in my phone. I have literally like millions of pictures. It's ridiculous. So then he defined greenwashing, and from what I understood, because I can't find the definition, I apologize. I should have been more prepared for this. Was that people are taking advantage of saying that, well, particularly companies, major corporations, but they're taking advantage of saying that they're eco-friendly or sustainable or they're doing all of these things, just kind of get that societal stamp of approval, like, oh well, they're doing something. They have green packaging, they have a little leaf on the side of it. And there was this amazing picture that James showed, that there was a bottle and it said, this bottle is paper, or something along those lines. And what the person did was actually cut the paper, and beneath the paper shell was a plastic bottle. So it's just kind of like this false advertising and very trying to seem altruistic, and in reality they're not really putting enough effort into addressing an issue that's going to affect us and probably future generations. So then what James did, which was interesting, so he looked at, he's a materials writer, right? So he went and researched the ELT materials, and he had a list of questions. And what he did was he went through, I think it was about 51 different books, ranges of levels, ranges of types. So there was general English in there, there was business English, there was for young learners, there was the academic, the preparatory courses, everything from A1 to C2. And he looked at all the different activities and where things kind of felt like what activities were in there and what did they do. And he had a whole list of questions. I really wish I could find this, but he had a whole list of questions about like kind of the criterion, like what is actually in the books. And so, you know, it's, yeah, it was not it was not great. Not James's presentation. The results of that little research were not great. There was many things that weren't being represented, or they were being represented in a way that was extraneous or extreme. And it wasn't the way that it probably should be represented. For example, I'll just give you one example while I'm trying to find all of the examples on my phone. One of the examples is that whenever we talk about climate change issues or environmental issues, it's a unit talking about passive voice, which infuriated James. Because passive voice, inherently, we're ignoring the agent, or we can ignore the agent. So we never actually put a person responsible for something. And that probably should happen, right? Because if someone's responsible for damaging a lot of the things that we've got in problems that we've got going on in the environment. Okay. Oh, I found it. Oh, great. So the questions were, does a book include related topics talking about, this kind of like climate, not only climate change. Oh, I will stop saying that. I'm so sorry, James. Not climate change, climate crisis or climate disaster or calamity, but we shouldn't say change. I did learn. I was paying attention to you. Which aspects of the climate crisis is mentioned? Are the terms climate change, climate crisis, global warming, greenhouse effect, or similar mentioned explicitly? Does the lesson suggest actions that can be taken to counteract the climate crisis? Does the lesson focus on individual, social, scientific, corporate, or governmental action? What is the source of the text? From whose point of view is it written? And are the students given an opportunity to discuss the causes of climate crisis? So those were the questions when he was going through all of the materials. Those were the questions that he was asking. And of course we can see, let me see if I can find it. Lots of stuff. Okay, so there was, hang on. So the result, is it a cause of the issues, is a cause of the issues described mentioned? So they would blame humans, they would blame anonymous entities, which was kind of like, oh, well, it's capitalism. Who's capitalism? I'm not really sure who capitalism is. It's capitalism causing the climate crisis. So passive voice, they would introduce that. So no agent, nobody's responsible. They would give no reason. So like this is happening in the world. Just no reason for it. Or they would give uncritical corporate invention. So uncritical reviews of corporate invention. So what they would do is they would say, oh, well, this is a fantastic thing and it's going to be amazing, and then but it's maybe not sustainable, it's maybe not mass producible, it's not a scalable and realistic. So yeah. And then he gave some really good information about carbon footprint, which I did not know. Just so you know, that the carbon footprint, that measure, was created by BP, British Petroleum, in 2004 with a PR company, Ogilvy Mather, sorry, I'm butchering that name, to promote, listen to it's like literally quoted, to promote the slant that climate change is not the fault of an oil giant, but that of individuals. There's a lot of other stuff you got, James. It was insane. I mean, the amount of, he really did go through and research it, and it was nuts. So a PhD student at the Stanford Law School said that this campaign from BP was the most successful deceptive PR campaigns maybe ever. I mean, BP is responsible for the worst offshore oil spills. I mean, it's just incredible, and they're the ones that created the idea of carbon footprint. So, we're not going to take responsibility for like what we did wrong. Let's just put it on individuals. So this was James's perspective of it, and I think James is realistic too. He had an idea that everybody's responsible. Obviously, you have personal responsibility to be a decent human and not destroy the habitat that we're living in. But I mean, like me drinking out of plastic straws, or BP with gallons of oil and petroleum spilled into the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, who's really? So, okay. So, we have to kind of think about, like, yeah. So the recommendations that James had was to look out for literal greenwashing, meaning like, oh no, we're doing everything perfect. Don't look, don't look, don't look, right? Name names, which I think is interesting, because I had thought of this when he was talking, that there was a cutting edge from 2012 that was printed, and it had a professional or Olympic athlete, and I don't remember the name. I have no resources here with me, so this is just from memory. And the athlete committed a horrific crime, and they reprinted the book. So what was interesting is that when an individual commits a crime, committed the crime, we remove them from the material as a publisher. But if major organizations are, committing crimes and being judged, or they're having to pay large settlements and lawsuits and things like that, nothing. It just kind of stays in there. It stays in the material, so no big deal. So yes. So name names. Hang on. Oops, sorry. I turned off my phone. I don't know why I did that. Logging back in. Oh, of course, it just didn't stay where it was supposed to. Okay, give learners the opportunity to properly discuss the issues, which I think is very important. We have to have difficult conversations. And I had a very difficult conversation today with one of my friends here at Breast Teasel, and it was uncomfortable, but we were both respectful about it. And I think that's, that's where you have to start. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but we had this really challenging, very controversial conversation, which was good for both of us. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I don't know if he did, but let's hope. Find ways to integrate the subject into related topics. Avoid euphemistic language and call it the climate crisis. Sorry for my previous slip of the climate change. And less personal virtue, more big action. So that was James's talk. Yeah, that's all the photos that I have of it. So there's a couple of things that popped into my mind when I'm thinking about business English, because I went to all of these talks because I think they're it's really interesting, and to learn about these things, and then I always try to relate it to actually what I'm doing. So James said, which I was a little proud of, but he said that the business English textbooks that he saw were the examples in the findings were the most compelling, because they talked about corporate responsibility and things like that. So and he wasn't sure why he didn't do a big analysis on that. He just kind of made that statement and then moved on, because it wasn't part of his talk. I was focused on the business English part, and I was wondering why that is, why his impression of business English course books would have more how did he say, the most compelling materials about it. And I was thinking about possibly that businesses have more structure, and they're always trying to move towards a hierarchical system with lots of rules and regulations, and where I think some people are disapproving of that. But I also think that it kind of gives that structure, right? So if we have these grand ideas, we have to be able to implement them. So it's kind of however you want to describe it, those two dichotomies. We have to have this really great idea, but then we also have to have the people or organizations to be able to kind of take that idea and fuse it into a plan that has like some progress to it. So, I was thinking about like, well, why would the business English have the most compelling examples of that? And I'm thinking it's because of the structure that businesses inherently have, that hierarchical structure with the rules and the regulations. And I'm thinking that probably lends itself to seeing some more, because business people are trying to get to like a more regulated state. That was my idea. I'm not sure. And then at the end, that the companies are pushing, especially BP, gross statistics about them. I was unimpressed, and actually quite unaware. So companies are pushing for individual responsibility. Like, this is because individuals are not doing their part. And to quote James, I wrote it down, it doesn't work. And he cited evidence of the pandemic, right? So, we were traveling less and using less and doing all of that. The only thing that I thought about was, so James said it doesn't work. Putting everything on individual responsibility doesn't work. Okay, based on the evidence that we've seen. But my question, I guess, that popped into my head and I was a little unsure about was, well, how many people are actually taking responsibility? Because I know that, at least myself, during the pandemic, I was using way more plastic products and way more stuff because I was ordering things and the supermarkets were delivering to my house. And like, when I go grocery shopping, it's a little bit different. I typically don't take lots of plastic and styrofoam and everything else. But then during the pandemic, personally, I saw an increase in like packaging and things like that. And it was kind of unavoidable for me at that time. But I'm not criticizing James's point, and he's saying, it doesn't work. I haven't investigated this at all. I'm just letting you know what happened in the session. But my question was, well, how many people are actually taking responsibility? Because if I were honest, I'm probably not doing what I should be. I try, in general. I try not to, be a polluter or use extra things, but I don't know if you could look at my lifestyle and be like, well, she's doing her part and taking like full responsibility of what she's using and what she's, the waste that I'm producing and how I'm contributing to the crisis as well. So I think personal responsibility has a part in this, though. I don't think we can throw it all onto the governments. But James did say that, so I can't, say that he wasn't saying that. I don't even know how we would measure about personal responsibility. So yes, it was really interesting, because taking a look at the materials and taking a look at what perspectives and how they're including ideas. I mean, James was really focused on greenwashing and that, but you can bring this out to broader topics. How are they, whose perspective is represented there and whose isn't perspective represented. So, it was just kind of like, when you're using the materials, think about it a little bit before just jumping into the next unit because it's the next unit, and what impression that's going to leave for your student inadvertently, most likely inadvertently. It's not like you're trying to indoctrinate them into, your ideas or anything, but having conversations and difficult conversations is important. So very thought-provoking. Loved it, James. Thank you very much. And also thank you very much for everything that you're doing for Breast TESOL. I know that you've been working super, super hard. So I really do appreciate it. And I think everybody else does, because we're having a great event. So that was it for Is ELT Guilty of Greenwashing by James Taylor.